My girlfriend's first love once saved her life. Because of that, she promised she would do 3 things for him, no matter what. The first time, it was when I proposed to her. He called her away to ride a Ferris wheel with him. The second time, I was hospitalized, running a high fever and hooked up to IVs. He asked her to accompany him on a trip to see the northern lights in Iceland, and she went. I'd been in love with her for 8 years. And I endured it all in silence. Until our wedding day, when she stood before our guests and openly admitted she wasn't marrying the man she truly loved. She tried to soothe me. George, after today, Henry and I will have nothing to do with each other. Just forgive me, one last time, please. But I didn't want to keep forgiving. If she wasn't marrying the right person, then I'd let her marry the right one. The officiant stood on the stage, asking that familiar question, "Do you take this man?" A quiet tension gripped my chest. My eyes couldn't help but drift toward Henry, sitting in the crowd with a confident smirk, like he already knew the ending of a story I hadn't finished reading. And then Anna Collins said, "I do." I finally exhaled. But just as I started to feel relief, she added, "I want to dedicate a song to my groom." The words were for me. But her eyes were fixed on Henry the entire time, filled with warmth and emotion that didn't belong to me. Bitterness surged in my chest. The MC gave her the stage. Then the music began, and I felt the floor beneath me vanish. I recognized the song immediately. Henry had written it himself. Lyrics and melody. The name of the song is "Not Marrying the One You Truly Love." She sang for 8 full minutes. And all I could think about were the 8 years I'd spent loving her. I'd fallen for Anna back in college, quietly, foolishly, and stayed by her side ever since. Through graduation, through jobs, through the years she never truly let go of Henry, I endured it all. Even when she agreed to marry me out of obligation, to save her family's business, I endured that too. But now, as I looked across the venue at my parents, their faces flushed with fury, and saw Anna and Henry gazing at each other like no one else existed, something inside me snapped. Maybe she sensed my shift. She stepped down from the stage, walking toward me slowly, gently setting down the microphone. "George," she whispered, "please. Henry promised this would be the last time. From now on, there'll be nothing between us." But that's the thing, she said it like if I forgave her, it would magically make that true. I knew better. Henry couldn't marry her, and this was his final act, to humiliate me in front of everyone. To ensure this wedding would haunt me for years to come. And as I stared at the woman who still pretended to be in love with me, for the first time ever, I felt disgusted. I took a step back, creating distance between us. Then I slipped the ring from my hand and let it fall to the floor with a soft clink. "Since you haven't married the person you love, then go and marry him right away. He is right in the audience." I held the microphone in my hand and my voice echoed throughout the venue. The room erupted into whispers and gasps. Murmurs rippled through the guests like a wave. For a brief moment, I caught the flicker of embarrassment on Anna's face. "George, don't do this," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Today is our wedding." "Oh, so now you remember it's our wedding?" I said, my tone cutting. "Well, I've changed my mind. I don't want to get married anymore." "You're free, go marry the man you actually want." Then I turned my gaze toward the crowd again, locking eyes with Henry. "Congratulations, Henry. You won. I'm done with her. I wish you both a long, happy life together." Of course, every word I said was meant to sting him. Henry wasn't just some random ex. He was a rising music producer, the kind of person trying to claw his way into elite social circles. Our circle. And today, he used this wedding as a ladder. But now, I was tearing that ladder down. I tossed the mic carelessly to the ground, shrugged off my suit jacket, and walked off the stage without looking back. Before I left, I grabbed my parents and walked them out with me. No one said a word on the drive home. There was no yelling. Just silence, and the soft, comforting weight of my mother's arms around me as she held me close in the back seat, trying to soothe the kind of pain no words could reach. 8 years. I had loved Anna Collins for 8 years. And it hurt like hell. We came from the same world, went to the same college, moved through the same social circles. If the Collins family hadn't run into financial trouble, Anna would have never agreed to marry me in the first place. And deep down, I knew that. I'll admit it, I was a little shameless. During our 2 years of dating, I let myself believe I'd finally moved her heart. That maybe, just maybe, I'd become more than a consolation prize. Even when she dropped everything for Henry, time and time again, I stayed. I waited. I endured. My family never wanted to get involved with the Collins mess in the first place. After all, the Collins family is not from the same class as mine. But I wanted it. And because I wanted it, my parents let it slide. If I had chosen to forgive her today, if I had swallowed this final blow, then it wouldn't just be my dignity that got trampled. My mother watched as I broke down in tears, and eventually, she couldn't hold back anymore. "George," she said softly, "if you still want to marry her, we can put pressure on the Collins family. Anna will come back and apologize to you." But I knew better. Even if my parents didn't lift a finger, Anna would come back on her own. She'd show up, say sorry, maybe even cry a little. But I didn't want any of it. I shook my head. "Mom, I'm sorry. I embarrassed you and Dad today. But I'm done with Anna." This wasn't her leaving me, it was me walking away from her. My mother sighed, brushing my hair gently like I was a child again. "Then maybe it's for the best. A woman like that? She's not worth it." She didn't push further. But both my parents knew I wasn't okay. That night, after we got home, they quietly arranged a trip for the whole family, just to get me away from it all. And because I couldn't help myself, I picked Iceland. We went to see the Northern Lights together. It was, without question, the most beautiful sight I'd seen in years. Because years ago, it was here, beneath that same glowing sky, that I had once saved Anna's life. We'd watched the aurora side by side, wrapped in each other's warmth. Back then, I thought it was the beginning of everything. Now, I chose to make it the end. 1 week. That's all it took for me to let go of 8 years of love. But when I flew back home, I never imagined what was waiting for me. The internet was on fire, and I was at the center of the storm. Someone had clipped a recording from the wedding. My voice, twisted out of context, was now echoing across social media. "If you love Henry so much, then marry him. I'm done." Henry's fans went wild. They had no idea what really happened at the ceremony. As far as they knew, I was just a jealous fiancé who humiliated Henry in public. And the Collins family? They stayed silent, never once stepping up to set the record straight. That silence gave Henry's fans the fuel they needed. Online hate exploded overnight. They painted me as some villain trying to drag their idol down. Within days, photoshopped, memorial tributes of me were trending, my face plastered on fake obituaries, my name in mocking hashtags. But the worst part wasn't the chaos, it was the feeling in my gut that none of this was accidental. Neither I nor my parents were naive. We'd been in the public eye long enough to know, a storm this big doesn't happen unless someone's pushing it behind the scenes. Even our PR team, one of the best in the industry, couldn't get it under control. And in my gut, I knew exactly who was behind it. Anna. When the call finally connected, I could hear Henry's voice in the background. "Anna, don't you think you owe me an explanation for everything happening online?" But Anna's voice came through cold and indifferent, completely unfazed by the chaos that had unfolded at our wedding. "George," she said flatly, "if you're willing to apologize to Henry, we can still reschedule the ceremony. I'll even go through with the marriage registration." I almost laughed at myself, for that brief, stupid moment when I'd hoped she might show a shred of remorse. Instead, I burst out laughing, the kind of bitter laugh you give when you realize just how low someone can go. "Anna," I said, voice sharp with disbelief, "actually, I was about to ask Henry the same damn thing, do either of you have any shame left? The entire internet's up in flames, you've said nothing, and now you want me to apologize? If it weren't for you," she snapped, "Henry wouldn't be at risk of losing his job. You brought this on yourself, you deserve every bit of that backlash." Same Anna. Always on her pedestal, always blaming someone else. I didn't hesitate another second. I ended the call mid-sentence. When I turned around, my parents were watching me, questions in their eyes. I gave them a faint smile. "Dad," I said calmly, "cut off funding to the Collins family. A woman like that doesn't deserve a damn thing from us." There was no deeper reason behind my decision, I just wanted to see something. Without my family's financial support, I wanted to know if Anna would still have the nerve to tell me to apologize to Henry. As for the online smear campaign, I didn't issue any public statements. Instead, I paid to have the headlines removed entirely. That was the real test. If there really was someone pulling the strings behind all this, the news would find its way back, without my name ever being cleared. And just as I suspected, by the next morning, the headline was back at the top of every news feed. That's when I knew for sure. Someone wasn't just stirring the pot, they were targeting me directly. Once I had confirmation, everything else became much easier to deal with. And right on cue, my phone started lighting up, text after text from Henry. Photo after photo. Pictures of him and Anna together during the week I'd been away. Messages filled with smug arrogance. George, do you really think Anna ever loved you? She only ever loved me. There were dozens of pictures. But one in particular hit me like a punch to the gut. It was a shot of Anna and Henry embracing on a mountaintop at sunset. Anna had once told me she hated hiking. Said she wasn't into outdoor activities, said she preferred museums and quiet cafes. But now, there she was, standing on the highest peak in the city, in Henry's arms, bathed in golden light. My heart twisted in my chest. But after the initial sting, what I really felt was pity. Henry was an idiot. Up until now, all the public outrage had been directed at me. Every headline, every insult, every fake obituary, they were all aimed my way. But not anymore. I had no problem using Henry as a lightning rod, even if he wasn't the mastermind behind it all. I gathered every photo he'd sent me, every self-satisfied message, and forwarded it all to the media outlets I'd quietly paid off in advance. It took just 2 hours for the entire narrative to flip. No amount of hush money on Henry's end could bury the truth now, not when I held irrefutable proof in my hands. And sure enough, Henry lost it. My phone exploded with messages from him, vile, disgusting rants filled with slurs and threats. Anna wasn't far behind, calling me non-stop, more times in a single day than she had in our entire 3-year relationship combined. The irony didn't escape me. I ignored every message, every call. Took a few quiet days at home to clear my head before heading back to work. But just as I pulled into the company parking lot and turned off the engine, I noticed something, movement, fast and erratic, coming toward me from the far side of the lot. Instinct kicked in, I reached for the door handle, ready to duck back into the car. Too late. She was already there. A woman came barreling toward me, eyes wild, clutching a knife that caught the glint of morning light like ice. Pain shot through my abdomen in a white-hot wave. My vision blurred. But even as I staggered back, I grabbed her, hard, determined not to let her escape. If I was going down, she was going with me. In the haze, I heard her shrieking into a phone. Henry, don't worry. I got him. That bastard won't ever hurt you again. Right after saying that, she even kicked me. The pain was unbearable. I could feel the strength draining from my body, the warmth of my blood soaking through my shirt. Panic crept in fast and sharp, like ice under my skin. I didn't want to die, not like this, not with so much left unresolved. One thought kept echoing through the haze. If I survive this, I swear, I'll make Henry pay. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. My mother sat at my side, her eyes swollen from crying, dark circles etched beneath them. Just looking at her made my heart ache in a different kind of way. The moment she saw I was awake, tears spilled over again, this time from joy. George, she sobbed, clutching my hand. The police already collected the tissue samples from under your nails. They will find the murderer, I promise. I didn't tell her that I already suspected Henry was behind it. This wasn't something I wanted to burden my parents with. I brought this mess into my life, I'd be the one to clean it up. I gently squeezed her hand and offered a faint smile. Mom, let me handle this. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't want to drag you and Dad into this any further. She nodded, tears still brimming in her eyes. Oh, George, she said, remembering something. Anna's been at the hospital for days. She's been asking to see you. We didn't let her in before, but now that you're awake, she's just outside. Do you want to see her? I hesitated. There were still things between us that needed to be put to rest. So I nodded. Mom stepped out, and a few moments later, Anna walked in. She didn't wait for me to speak. She sat down as if nothing had happened. George, she began, I know you're angry, but you shouldn't let personal emotions affect business. I'm sorry, truly. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I won't have any more contact with Henry, will that satisfy you? I stared at her, and for a moment, I genuinely wondered what kind of person I'd fallen in love with all these years. Anna, I said slowly, I was stabbed. I nearly died. And you walk in here not to ask if I'm okay, but to talk about our relationship and business? What the hell is wrong with you? She frowned, clearly annoyed. Even here, even now, she still thought she was above me. Don't be dramatic, George. If the partnership between our families falls apart, we both lose. Maybe this injury is just a wake-up call for you. The rage burned so hard it made my wound throb again. 8 years. 8 years of loyalty, patience, and love, thrown away like nothing. You know what? I said coldly, my voice low but sharp. Let me make this clear, I will never marry you. Ever. I looked her dead in the eye. And just so you understand, you were the one trying to marry up. Terminating the partnership would be a loss for your company, but I would not lose anything. If it weren't for the fact that I cared about you, do you really think you'd have had a seat at the table? You were never on my level. Her expression hardened instantly. She wasn't used to hearing me speak to her like that. But damn, it felt good. I let a slow, cold smile spread across my face. You love Henry so much? Then let him go find the money to bail your company out. Let's see how far your so-called love takes you now that there's no one left to clean up your mess. She stood up abruptly, her voice sharp and bitter. You'll regret this. Regret? If anything, I regretted not walking away 8 years ago. Still, I didn't let that anger linger too long. Later that day, I called the officer assigned to my case and shared everything I remembered from that chaotic moment, the woman's voice, her words, her comments about Henry. The next day, the officer came to see me in person. She went over every detail carefully, her demeanor calm and professional, but with a quiet sense of determination that put me strangely at ease. Before leaving, she poured a glass of warm water and set it gently on the table by my bed. Try to drink more water, she said softly. It'll help with the recovery. Officer, I said quietly, could I ask one more thing? Please don't tell my parents everything, about what really happened. They're getting older, and I don't want to scare them. Getting attacked over a broken relationship, it was humiliating enough without dragging them into the ugliness. She paused for a moment, then gave me a firm nod. You have my word. We'll keep it confidential. I thanked her sincerely and watched as she walked out the door. I spent more than 2 months in the hospital before I was finally discharged. But the first piece of news I heard after getting out took me completely by surprise. Anna and Henry had gone public with their engagement, loudly and proudly. Even more unexpected, Mr. Collins began bringing Henry to high-profile social events, clearly signaling his intention to integrate him into our elite circle. It didn't stop there. The Collins family's finances had also received a significant injection of capital. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. For Mr. Collins to change his opinion so drastically, there could only be one reason behind it: money. But Henry didn't come from wealth. There was no way he could have pulled this off on his own. That's when things got interesting. Because the funding that salvaged the Collins family had come from the Hearst family. Naturally, I had someone discreetly investigate Henry's activities over the past 2 months, especially any ties between him and the Hearsts. But before the results even came back, a formal invitation from the Collins family arrived at my door. Anna was pregnant. I'd been in the hospital for 2 months. Anna was already 3 months along. The timing said everything. They didn't send that invitation for goodwill. It was a power play, an attempt to humiliate my family in public. I didn't let my parents attend. No need to subject them to that circus. I went alone. At the event, Henry stood beside Anna, both of them practically glowing with smug satisfaction. He wore a necklace around his neck, a so-called family heirloom that Mr. Collins once told me would be gifted to me if I married Anna. Now it dangled proudly on Henry's chest. Anna looked perfectly content, her slight baby bump already starting to show. Henry kept his hand on her belly, caressing it with performative tenderness, and then strutted toward me like a soldier parading a trophy. George, he said with a smug grin, so what if your family's rich? I'm the one standing next to Anna now. I took a subtle step back and rubbed my nose dramatically. Henry, you might want to go easy on that designer cologne, I said casually. Pregnant women shouldn't be inhaling that much synthetic fragrance. His expression soured instantly. Cut the crap, George. You lost. I'm the one who's going to live happily ever after with Anna, and you? You'll just stand on the sidelines watching. I chuckled under my breath, then leaned in slightly, just enough to unsettle him. Henry, I said quietly, are you sure this is your only kid? You might want to think about that, you know exactly what I mean. The blood drained from his face. His smug confidence collapsed into unease in seconds. What the hell are you talking about? He demanded, voice shaky. You know, I said simply, sipping my drink with calm detachment. You know. In truth, I was bluffing, just throwing bait. But judging by his reaction, I might have accidentally hit a nerve. Henry had been far from discreet in his private life. The odds weren't zero. What a pair they were, truly entertaining. Henry was still reeling, but Anna noticed the shift immediately. She rushed over and stepped protectively between us, placing herself squarely in front of him. "What are you trying to do, George?" she snapped, eyes sharp. I spread my hands, feigning innocence. "Nothing. Just chatting." "You saw it." She opened her mouth to say something more, but Henry grabbed her shoulder and gently pulled her back. "Anna, let's go. You need to rest." "All right." She gave me one last glare, sharp, defensive, full of hostility. A look I'd never seen from her before, not even during our worst fights. Funny, isn't it? She'd never defended me like that when we were together. But now, she shielded Henry like he was the only thing that mattered in the world. Within a month, Henry had become the talk of the town. Everyone in our circle knew by now, he was the Collins family's shiny new son-in-law. Anna showered him with attention, even buying him extravagant gifts at charity auctions, making a spectacle of her affection. For a while, they were the center of everything, glamorous, untouchable, smug. I, on the other hand, was sitting across from Becky Hurst at a quiet, private lounge. "You and the Collins family have been at each other's throats for years," I said, casually sipping my drink. "What happened, enemies to lovers now?" From the moment I learned the Hurst family had funded the Collinses, I knew something was off. Becky had always despised Anna. She wasn't the type to show mercy, let alone lend a helping hand. If she wasn't kicking you while you were down, she was probably just waiting for a better shot. Becky gave me a crooked smile. "What, George? You here to fight for your poor little ex-fiancé? Still playing the loyal puppy?" I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. She wasn't wrong, once upon a time, I'd been exactly that. "Please," I said coolly. "I'm not interested in being anyone's backup plan. I'm just curious. Henry's little love child, who does it belong to?" That wiped the smirk clean off her face. Becky leaned back in her chair, clearly done pretending. "Who knows," she said with a shrug. "Everyone in this community knew he was cheating. Anna's the only one naive enough to think she caught a diamond in the rough." Then she tilted her glass toward me with a wicked grin. "As for that funding, think of it as me lifting someone up just so I can watch them fall harder." I nodded slowly, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Well, then, best of luck. Don't worry, I won't interfere." Becky laughed lightly. "George, you really are a master of love and revenge." I didn't respond. On the way back to my car, I received the final dossier on Henry, just as my phone rang again. It was the police officer assigned to my case. They had arrested the woman who stabbed me. But the strange part? She took full responsibility. Claimed it was all her own doing, that no one else was involved. When I arrived at the station, I recognized her instantly, Henry's ex-girlfriend. I'd seen her in the background of old photos, and I'd had her name flagged during my initial investigation. I knew how obsessed she was with Henry. I leaned toward the police officer and said quietly, "Tell her that Henry and Anna are having a baby, and that her own child is being sent back to her hometown. She'll talk. Trust me." The police officer nodded. Before I left, I handed over a small voice recorder. "This has my conversation with Becky on it. It might help you uncover the real story. Tomorrow is the Collins family's big project launch. Henry will be there. I'll be waiting for your good news. Just don't forget to return the recorder." I figured she understood exactly what I meant, and walked away. The next day, I showed up at the Collins family's press conference. The event was swarming with major media outlets. Cameras, reporters, business elites, everyone was there. Henry stood beside Anna, basking in the limelight, radiating the air of a newly crowned heir to the throne. He looked like he finally believed his own fantasy. But just as the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, sirens blared outside. Police vehicles surrounded the venue. Officers stormed in, pushing past security, heading straight for Henry. In a matter of seconds, he was in handcuffs. Camera flashes lit up the chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture every second of the scene. Henry, red-faced and disheveled, completely lost his composure. "Anna! Anna, help me! They've got the wrong guy. Anna!" But Anna's face had gone pale as ash. One of the officers approached her, presenting a warrant. She froze. Even if she wanted to intervene, she couldn't anymore. From my seat in the audience, I watched the spectacle unfold, every expression, every flicker of panic, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. It was poetic, really. The entire scene went viral within hours. News clips, social media commentary, sensational headlines, it was everywhere. Even if Henry wasn't directly involved in what happened to me, his career was over. His reputation? Destroyed. Even if he walked free eventually, he'd never walk proud again. What I didn't expect was how far the Collins family would go for Henry. They hired the most expensive legal team in the city and poured a fortune into smoothing things over with the right people. And with no concrete evidence linking Henry directly to the attack, the police found themselves cornered. Millions of dollars later, Henry was still walking free. Then came the part one least anticipated. Anna came to see me. This time, she dropped all her pride, literally. She fell to her knees in front of me, tears brimming in her reddened eyes. "George. I'm begging you," she cried. "Please, just let Henry go this once. The prison environment is terrible, and I'm pregnant. This baby needs its father." I stared at her, not with anger, but with curiosity. "If you loved him so much," I asked calmly, "why did you so casually agree to marry me in the first place?" Her face flushed with shame. She lowered her eyes before mumbling, "My family threatened to disown me if I didn't. I had no choice. But George, that was my mistake. All of it was on me. Please, don't make Henry pay for my choices." For the first time in a long while, something in me settled. The bitterness, the resentment, it finally started to lift. I nodded slowly. "All right. I'll give you that chance." And just like that, with my public statement softening the tension, Henry was released on bail soon after. Police officer Selena, who had been handling my case since the beginning, looked at me in disbelief. "You've been fighting to bring him down for weeks," she said, clearly confused. "Why now? He tried to have you killed." She must have thought I'd lost my mind again, letting old feelings cloud my judgment. But I gave her a calm smile. "No, police officer. You don't have enough evidence to keep him locked up, and even if you did, it wouldn't end here. You can't do what I can." She narrowed her eyes at me. "If anything illegal happens from here on out, no matter who it is, we won't look the other way." "Of course," I replied lightly. "I'm a law-abiding citizen." When Henry finally walked out of the precinct, reporters swarmed the front steps. Flashbulbs popped from every direction. He looked haggard, drained of his usual arrogance. "I've been framed," he shouted to the cameras. "I'm innocent. I would never do anything like that." Anna stepped in front of him protectively, her voice trembling with emotion. "Henry isn't that kind of person. He's just a kind-hearted music producer caught in a cruel misunderstanding. That woman framed him. Please, let the media tell the truth. Henry deserves justice." I almost burst out laughing. Did they really think this public theater would sway people? If anything, it only fueled the fire online. The backlash was even worse than before. But within days, Henry and Anna doubled down. Probably fearing more damage, they rushed to get legally married, and they didn't just keep it quiet. They made a whole spectacle out of it. They posted their marriage certificate like it was a trophy, as if shouting to the world, "You may all hate us, but look how happy we are." To me, it was just pathetic. But before I had the chance to reveal what I knew, Anna showed up, at my home. And this time, she didn't waste a single breath on pleasantries. "What's going on with our family's capital chain? Why did Becky invest? What have you done?" I gave her a long, slow look. "Anna, have you gone crazy because of love? It was Henry who found the investment for you, not me. Why do you come here to question me?" Her expression hardened. "Henry told me he had already secured Becky's support. But ever since you met with her, the Hearst family suddenly pulled their backing. George. I know you still have feelings for me, but I'm married now. You don't want to be the third wheel in our relationship, do you?" I actually laughed. Out loud. A bitter, incredulous laugh. Then, without a second thought, I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. "Anna, are you finally thinking straight now? Are you seriously this naive? You've been at odds with Becky for years. What made you think she'd suddenly throw money at you just because Henry asked? What is she, a charity case like you? And Anna, if I had known you'd become this pathetic, I should have just let you die back in Iceland." I thought she'd snap, yell, cry, something. But she just stood there, frozen in place. "What did you say?" she whispered. "Back in Iceland, it was you who saved me?" I looked at her, confused by her shock. "Did you think someone else did? We watched the aurora together. Who else could it have been?" She took a shaky step back, as if the ground beneath her had just shifted. "No, it was Henry. He told me he saved me. When I woke up, you weren't there. Why weren't you there?" And in that moment, everything clicked. She'd been injured, disoriented, barely conscious. She didn't remember the truth at all. We were both badly hurt. "I was in a coma for months," I said quietly. "I couldn't be there." She collapsed onto the couch, looking like someone whose entire sense of reality had just been ripped apart. Sure, it stung a little, watching someone else steal credit for saving her life. But seeing her fall apart now. I knew Henry would feel the fallout soon enough. And honestly, that wasn't my concern anymore. I gave her more chances than she deserved. She didn't cherish it. "George, why are you telling me all this now? Why didn't you tell me at the beginning? We were supposed to be lovers." Her voice trembled, laced with regret. "Oh, so now it's about who saved your life? Is that how love works in your head?" She stumbled out the door, dazed and shattered. What happened between her and Henry after that, I couldn't have cared less. All I knew was, 2 weeks later, the Collins family filed for bankruptcy. I threw a massive party to celebrate. Everyone in our circle was invited, including Becky. People whispered all night, Anna gave up a diamond for a piece of glass. But me? I was just thankful I never married her. If I had, that financial disaster would have landed squarely on my shoulders. I even sent Becky a small gift that night. She accepted it with a smug smile, no hesitation. As I walked out of the bar later that night, Anna appeared from the shadows, grabbing my wrist. She looked completely different, disheveled, worn out. The designer clothes were gone, sold off. She wore a cheap dress, her pregnant belly now unmistakable. "George. I'm sorry." I calmly pulled my wrist from her grip. "Save it. I don't need your apologies anymore." "No, please, if I hadn't mistaken the wrong person back then, none of this would have happened." "George, is there still a chance for us? I mean it, I was wrong. Can we start over? Let's get married. I love you, George. I really do." I felt nothing but disgust. "Anna, I gave you more chances than you ever deserved. Then, you weren't good enough for me, and now, you just make me sick. Get out of my way." She tried to chase after me, reaching for my car door. "Anna," I said coldly, "this car's expensive. You so much as touch it, you'll regret it." She froze, her hand hovering in the air, then slowly pulled it back, defeated. All she could do was watch as I drove away. Maybe her plea held some sincerity. Maybe not. But seeing her like that now, all I felt was revulsion. And perhaps she finally understood the truth. If I hadn't loved her once, she never would have had a seat at the table in the first place. Still, on the day Anna gave birth, I went to the hospital. It was a private clinic we had prearranged months ago, back when things were still different. So that's where they went through with the delivery. I arrived early and waited in the attending physician's office, holding documents in hand, paternity test results, details on Henry's illegitimate child, everything neatly prepared. The moment the truth came out, the Collins family exploded. And just to complete the spectacle, I handed the voice recorder to Anna right then and there, my final gift. Mr. Collins stormed into the delivery room, grabbed Henry by the collar before he could even lay eyes on the newborn, and dragged him out into the hallway. Henry hit the ground with a thud, stunned and confused, staring up at him in disbelief. "Dad, what are you doing? Why can't I see the baby?" That only made Mr. Collins even angrier. He raised his hand and slapped Henry hard across the face. "You filthy bastard. You cheated on my daughter, lied to us, and dragged this family into bankruptcy. I should have killed you when I had the chance. George is 1,000 times better than you. This is all your fault." He struck Henry again and again, each slap heavier than the last, venting every ounce of his fury. Henry tried to fight back, but he was no match. He was curled on the floor, groaning in pain. Anna stood nearby, watching it all unfold in silence. Her face was cold, expressionless. There wasn't even a flicker of emotion in her eyes. As for me, I just watched with a faint smile, amused by the chaos they'd created for themselves. There was no point staying any longer. That family had always been a ticking time bomb, something I learned the hard way when I was still with Anna. I patted the doctor on the shoulder and offered him a friendly nod. Nice work today. Let's have dinner together next time. Then I turned and walked out. Right at the hospital entrance, I ran into Anna again. George, you knew all along, didn't you? I nodded, smiling coolly. Of course I did. I'd kept it from her on purpose, because I wanted her to see this moment unfold with her own eyes. Let the Collins family feel the sting they once tried to use against mine. How could you do this to me? She asked, voice trembling. Didn't you love me? You used to love me, didn't you? Her eyes were filled with something that might have once moved me, remorse, longing, maybe even guilt. But now, all I felt was disgust. Stop kidding yourself, Anna. I stopped loving you a long time ago. You just didn't notice. Maybe she did know. Maybe she'd always known how much I loved her, and that's why she used it to humiliate me over and over again. People like her always remember why they said yes, just never why they should have said no. Anna, instead of standing here, you should go stop your parents from beating the life out of your precious husband. If the doctor calls the cops, guess who'll be the ones arrested? She didn't argue. She turned back toward the hospital, limping slightly as she walked away. Watching them fall apart piece by piece, it was the first time in years I truly felt peace. Time flew by. A year passed. And somewhere in between it all, I found something better, someone better. Selena, the police officer who'd handled my case, eventually became the woman I loved. What started with quiet companionship turned into something real. We supported each other, understood each other, and slowly, deeply, we fell in love. With her, I finally understood what it meant to be loved, and to love in return. 5 years later, we got married. It was nothing extravagant. Just joy, just warmth, just the right person standing beside me. And once, by pure coincidence, I saw Henry and Anna again. Henry was unrecognizable, disheveled, filthy, begging for spare change on a city street. Anna stood a few feet away, watching blankly. No emotion. No reaction. Just silence. For a second, I almost didn't believe it. That this was the same man who once stood tall at a press conference, who once smirked at me like he owned the world. But now? It didn't matter. Their lives, whatever mess they became, had nothing to do with me anymore. I had my own life. A better one. With someone who truly loved me. And nothing, not Henry, not Anna, not even the ghosts of the past, could ever touch me again. Second story. My wife had something come up at the last minute and asked me to attend our daughter's parent-teacher conference in her place. By the time I arrived at the school, most of the parents were already there. They were dressed head to toe in designer brands, sharp suits, polished shoes, luxury watches. And then there was me, plain shirt, worn-out jeans. I stood out like a sore thumb. The teacher glanced my way, and her face immediately twisted in thinly veiled contempt. I just don't get it, she muttered under her breath, but loud enough for others to hear. Alice's mom is an educated woman. How did she end up with you? I was about to respond when Alice cut me off, her voice sharp and loud enough to make the room go still. I don't want you at my parent-teacher conference. I want Uncle Henry. I froze for a second, stunned. Then I let out a cold laugh and pulled out my phone. Interesting, I said as I dialed my wife. Alice just told me you've given her a new dad. That true? And just like that, every parent in the room turned their eyes on me. The call didn't go through the first few times. She kept hanging up on me. When she finally picked up, her voice was already laced with irritation. George Rockefeller, what the hell is wrong with you now? I'm in the middle of a meeting, can't it wait till I get home? I glanced at my daughter, who was glaring at me like I was some unwanted guest in her life. I shook my head. It can't. There was a beat of silence, then Anna exploded on the other end of the line. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I'm in love with someone else. Happy now? I closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Just tell me why. All these years, I've never done anything to hurt either of them. Never cheated, never abandoned them, never failed to show up when it mattered. And yet, her words hit me like a sucker punch straight to the gut. She scoffed. Why do you even have the nerve to ask? Did Alice say anything that wasn't true? Her tuition alone costs $100,000 a year. Have you paid a single dime toward it? Let me make this clear, George Rockefeller, if it weren't for me busting my ass out there, you wouldn't even have the right to sit in that classroom. Even though I had turned the volume on my phone all the way down, her voice still rang through the room like a siren. With the status you have now, you don't deserve to be Alice's father. Silence fell. Alice's eyes were still fixed on me, full of resentment and disdain, like I was some kind of disgrace. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay composed. I crouched a little, trying to meet her eyes gently. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "can you tell me what's really going on?" She didn't hesitate. "Mom said you're broke. You can't afford to take care of us." I clenched my jaw. Sure, I've never been obsessed with money. But I could cover $100,000 tuition if I needed to. More importantly, did they forget that Alice even got into this school because I made one phone call? Did they really believe money was the only thing that mattered here? The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't hold back. "Anna," I said sharply into the phone, "you heard what Alice just said. Don't you think I deserve an explanation? That $100,000 for her tuition, who paid it? And why the hell didn't you say anything to me?" "An explanation?" she scoffed, her tone thick with disdain. "What is there to explain? Would it have made any difference if I told you? Could you even afford it? If it weren't for Mr. Morgan's connections, your daughter wouldn't even have had a shot at this school." I frowned. "Mr. Morgan? Who the hell is that?" There was a brief pause on the other end. Then Anna sneered. "You don't deserve to know his name. All you need to understand is this: Mr. Morgan is the one funding our daughter's education." My eyes narrowed instinctively, fingers clenching so tight my knuckles cracked. "Anna," I said, my voice low and cold, "I don't care who this man is or what kind of arrangement you have with him, cut it off. Now. I'll handle Alice's tuition myself. I don't need anyone else's charity." The words had barely left my mouth when Alice shoved me hard in the chest. "No," she snapped. "I don't want anything from you. I only want Uncle Henry." I staggered a step back, staring at her in disbelief. My own daughter. Had she really just said that? I opened my mouth, wanting to correct her, to set boundaries, when Anna's voice came crashing through the phone again. "Did you hear that, George? Even your daughter doesn't want you around anymore. What's the point of you sticking around? If I were you, I'd sit down and keep my mouth shut. Stop embarrassing yourself." With that, she hung up. Utter, suffocating silence. I stood there, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me, and everything finally clicked. So this was her plan all along. Anna didn't just want me to attend the parent-teacher conference. She wanted to drive a wedge between me and my daughter. To humiliate me. Publicly. Deliberately. I looked at Alice, a heaviness tightening in my chest. "Alice," I asked softly, "tell me the truth. Do you really think I'm an embarrassment to you?" She didn't even hesitate. She nodded without the slightest flicker of guilt. "Of course I do. I go to an elite prep school. Just tuition alone is $100,000 a year. Mom said you don't even make enough to support yourself. If I stay with you, my life will be nothing but hardship." I stared at her, heart cracking a little with every word. But instead of lashing out, I simply smiled. "Then tell me, sweetheart," I said gently, "who do you think really deserves to be your father?" I knew, deep down, I knew someone had coached Alice into saying all that. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, hearing those words from my own daughter still stung more than I cared to admit. Alice's eyes flicked from side to side, then she blurted out, "Uncle Henry. Only Uncle Henry deserves to be my dad." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "Sweetheart, can you tell me, who exactly is Uncle Henry?" But before Alice could answer, the other parents jumped in. "You're kidding, right? This guy doesn't even know who Mr. Morgan is? Is he really from the Upper East Side? Mr. Morgan's business empire spans every major industry. He practically built this school with his donations. Stop asking questions about the Morgans. You don't want to get yourself into trouble." Their words hit me like a slap. Not just the arrogance, but the sheer audacity of it, mocking a father, openly, in front of his own child. What kind of values was this school teaching? No wonder my daughter, who used to be kind and thoughtful, could now say such cruel things so effortlessly. I didn't want to waste another second arguing with these people. I just wanted to take Alice and leave. I'd deal with the principal later. But before I could take a single step, Alice sank her teeth into the back of my hand, hard. I jerked back in pain, shaking her off and staring at her in disbelief. "Alice. What the hell are you doing? I'm your father. Since the day she was born, I had never raised my voice at her. Never laid a hand on her. But this time, I was at my limit. I could take the insults from outsiders. I could ignore my wife's tirade on the phone. I'd even tell myself she was just blinded by bitterness. But my own daughter turning against me like this? That broke something in me. Alice stuck her tongue out at me, then pouted like a spoiled brat. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm waiting for Uncle Henry to pick me up. I stared at the little girl in front of me, but she felt like a stranger. A stranger wearing my daughter's face. My voice hardened. Alice, I don't care who this Uncle Henry is. You're coming with me, now. Whatever he can give you, I can give you just the same. That one sentence, that was all it took to set her off. Bullshit. Even Mom doesn't want you anymore, how the hell are you supposed to take care of me? I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. My eyes narrowed, locked on hers. Who told you I needed your mother for anything? Before I could say more, a few parents, clearly friends of Anna's, stepped forward, full of smirks and mockery. Well, look who's talking. Isn't that the little lapdog Anna keeps around? Yeah, seriously. Acting all high and mighty when he's nothing but a man living off a woman. Better watch your mouth. If Anna hears what you just said, you'll be sleeping on the floor for a week. They laughed, clapping like it was some kind of twisted performance. I cast a sideways glance at them, memorizing every face in the crowd. If I'm not mistaken, I said slowly, you're all part of Anna's little entourage, aren't you? They had been planting seeds from the moment I walked into that school, whispering, nudging, twisting my daughter's thoughts. It wasn't hard to guess this whole scene had been orchestrated from the start. But did Anna really think a few snakes in designer suits could bring me to my knees? If it weren't for the fact that I still had a decent relationship with the school principal, I would have torn this place apart already. You're talking nonsense, one of them snapped. We've got nothing to do with Anna. We just hate to see a child's future get ruined by a deadbeat like you. Seriously, you can't even afford the tuition, who the hell do you think you are to question us? I looked at them, eyes cold, voice calm, dead calm. I don't care whether you know my wife or not. But let me make one thing absolutely clear. If anyone here tries to poison my daughter's mind again, I won't hesitate to drag you out of this place myself. The sudden shift in my tone must have startled them. Those smug parents who'd been mocking me just moments ago were now fumbling over their words, unable to string together a coherent sentence. But amid the uneasy silence, Alice remained relentless. You can't talk to them like that, she snapped, stepping in front of me protectively. These people are all friends of Uncle Henry. Mom said if it weren't for Uncle Henry, I wouldn't even be studying here. If you try to bother me again, I swear I'll call him and have him come put you in your place. That was it. The last straw. My anger surged to the breaking point. In less than 30 minutes, she'd mentioned Uncle Henry at least 10 times, and not once had she called me Dad. Who the hell was this man, and what kind of spell had he cast on my daughter? Alice, I said through clenched teeth, trying to steady my voice, I don't care what your so-called Uncle Henry has done for you. I'm the one who raised you, the one who's always been there. How can you stand here and defend a stranger over your own father? I kept my expression calm, but my heart was pounding. She was still my daughter, no matter how much her words cut. No matter how hard it was to hear. But the more I held back, the more emboldened she became. You won't be my dad for much longer, she said, glaring at me. Mom told me, after today's parent-teacher meeting, she's filing for divorce. And then Uncle Henry's coming to pick me up. My eyes burned, blood vessels pulsing behind them as I struggled to hold myself together. Alice, I asked quietly, did your mom really say that to you? She nodded eagerly, her face lighting up like she was bragging. Of course she did. Uncle Henry's amazing. He's even taking me to a Michelin star restaurant for dinner tonight. That's when it hit me, crystal clear. My wife and daughter had already left me behind. I'd been replaced. And the man responsible for it all was Morgan. But unfortunately for them, they'd picked the wrong man to betray. I'm no pushover. I'm no disposable husband they can quietly cast aside. They may think the Morgans are untouchable, but for me, taking them down is no harder than squashing a fly. Money means nothing in the face of real power. And yet Alice had no idea she'd already pushed me to the edge. She kept piling it on, completely unaware of the fire she was stoking. You really should just leave, she sneered. You're embarrassing me. If Uncle Henry sees you here, he might misunderstand. Then, with a final shove, small, but humiliating, she pushed me again. I didn't stumble, but the insult landed hard. Around us, the other parents seized the moment to jump back in. Where's security? Get this man out of here, he doesn't belong in this class. Yeah, get rid of him. This kind of parent doesn't deserve to be here. I scanned the room, my eyes cold and sharp, cutting through every sneering face. Oh, so now you're trying to throw me out? I said, my voice low but deadly calm. Let me remind you, I'm still Alice's father. I'm here for a parent-teacher conference. That's my right. But before the last word left my mouth, Alice pulled out her phone and held it up like a weapon. No, you're not my dad anymore. And just like that, she dialed my wife again, right in front of everyone. The call connected. She held the phone out toward me, a smug little grin playing on her lips. Mom wants to talk to you. I took the phone. Anna's voice came through, cold and detached. George, I want a divorce. I had already braced myself for this moment, so I kept my expression cold and unreadable as I replied. Let me guess, you've already lined up your next man, haven't you? Anna sounded practically giddy on the other end, her excitement seeping through the phone. Let's just cut to the chase, how much do you want? As long as you're willing to give up custody of Alice, name your price. I'll pay whatever it takes. I glanced sideways at Alice, who was still standing beside me, then said flatly. We'll talk money later. Right now, I want just one thing. I paused for a beat, then let my voice drop, ice cold. Anna, answer me honestly, is Alice even my biological daughter? The room went deathly still. Every parent nearby stopped pretending not to listen and now openly watched, reveling in the unfolding spectacle. There was a brief silence on the other end before Anna let out a mocking laugh. Well, since you asked, you're right. Alice is not your daughter. I inhaled deeply, once, twice, trying to keep my heart from pounding out of my chest. Her real father, I said slowly, his last name, is it Morgan? My memory snapped back to the day Alice was born. Anna had insisted the baby take her last name. She'd refused to even enter the delivery room unless I agreed. Back then, I just thought she was being difficult. Now, I saw the truth, it had all been part of her plan. And at this point, I didn't care how many people were watching or how messy this looked. I needed to know exactly which bastard had been sleeping with my wife. Anna's voice came back, smug and cutting. So what if you figured it out? What are you gonna do now? Be smart, George. Signing divorce documents. You also get a good amount of money. For someone like you, who's made a career out of living off a woman, that's a damn good deal. I didn't lash out. Not yet. Not because I was weak, but because I needed clarity. But now I had it, Alice wasn't my daughter, and I didn't owe either of them a damn thing anymore. Enough. I snapped into the phone, then turned to the room full of gawking parents. This parent-teacher conference is over. And now I've got two options for all of you. Option 1, if you've got any sense, take your kids and get the hell out of my sight. The second option, stay here and perish with the Morgan family. The room erupted with laughter. You guys hear that? One parent chuckled. The broke guy thinks he can threaten us. Didn't you hear the call? Anna's new man is Mr. Morgan, the richest man on the Upper East Side. Yeah, the guy could crush you like a bug with a phone call. If anyone should be leaving, it's you. Mr. Morgan again. That name was like acid in my ears now. The rage boiling inside me had reached its limit. I steadied my voice and replied coldly, you all worship the Morgans like they're gods, but to me? He's nothing more than a rich clown. Alice's face darkened instantly. You're awful. Don't you dare say that about Uncle Henry. I looked her dead in the eye, my lips curling into a half-smile. You know what? Since you're not my daughter, I don't have to sugarcoat anything anymore. And here's a little news flash for you, your beloved Uncle Henry is about to go bankrupt. Her eyes widened in fury. Liar, she screamed, then lunged at me like a wildcat. But just as she reached me, the classroom door was kicked open with a thunderous bang. Everyone instinctively turned toward the sound. A young man around my age stormed in, swagger in every step, arrogance radiating off him like cologne. Really? He sneered. Picking a fight with a kid? Why don't you try coming at me instead? Uncle Henry, you're finally here. I missed you so much. Alice cried out with excitement. As soon as her voice rang out, the entire room seemed to shift. Parents rose from their seats in unison, all smiles and deference, ready to greet the man who had just walked in. I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow. Judging by the warm welcome, you must be the infamous Mr. Morgan everyone's been talking about. The man gave me a sideways glance, barely acknowledging my presence with a curt nod. You got it, he said with a smug smirk. I'm Henry Morgan. Alice's biological father. He looked around the room like he owned it, then added, actually, I should thank you. Since I've been out of the country for years, it's been convenient having someone else take care of my daughter. His tone was arrogant, dismissive. He didn't even bother to look at me directly. But I didn't take the bait. Instead, I gave him a calm, faint smile. Oh. I don't think Mr. Morgan came here just to express his gratitude. He arched a brow, eyes gleaming with disdain. You're right. I'm here to make you an offer. I repeated, playing along. That's odd. Far as I know, we're not even acquaintances. Then I chuckled, slowly shaking my head. Besides, isn't your precious Morgan empire about to go bankrupt? What business could you possibly have with me? His expression twisted instantly, the smugness replaced by fury. You've got a death wish. I was going to be generous, offer you a few million to walk away quietly. But now, his eyes narrowed, voice dropping into a threat. Seems like you have no idea who you're dealing with. I waved him off, completely unfazed. Who you are doesn't matter. What matters is, you've crossed the wrong man. And because of you, the Morgan family will fall. The moment I finished speaking, my fists moved faster than my thoughts. I launched a punch straight at him. Apparently, Mr. Morgan wasn't used to people actually hitting back, he didn't even get a chance to dodge. My fist slammed into his face, knocking him flat onto the floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Holy shit! Did he just punch Mr. Morgan in the face? Is he insane? Seriously, what's he thinking? If it were me, I'd have taken the money and disappeared. No one lays a hand on a Mr. Morgan and gets away with it. He's done for. Amid the growing chaos, Alice finally snapped out of her shock and rushed to Henry's side, helping him up with teary eyes. You're horrible. She yelled at me, fury written across her face. You hit my Uncle Henry. I'll never speak to you again. I shrugged, completely indifferent. Sweetheart, you've got it all backward. It's not about whether you'll talk to me again. I have nothing to do with you anymore. A few moments later, Henry Morgan staggered to his feet, wobbling slightly as he clutched his dislocated jaw. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with venomous rage. You laid hands on me? He growled. You're dead. He turned toward the hallway and shouted, Get in here, now. Within seconds, a dozen men in black suits burst into the classroom, storming toward me with calculated force. I was immediately surrounded, but before anyone could lay a hand on me, a firm voice rang out from behind them. Stand down. That's enough. Everyone turned in surprise. At the door stood an elderly man, slightly hunched, leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale from exertion. Principal Smith? What's he doing here? Someone whispered. The room went silent again, waiting for what would come next. Seeing what was unfolding in front of him, Principal Smith immediately tossed aside his cane and stepped between me and the circle of security guards. Mr. Rockefeller, my deepest apologies. I came as quickly as I could. I gave him a nod, more out of politeness than genuine acknowledgement. I used to hold this man in high regard. But now? Seeing the toxic culture festering in his school, I couldn't help but wonder how much he had already pocketed from the Morgans. The fire inside me surged. Brian Smith, I said coldly, I want an explanation. Even if Alice isn't my biological daughter, are you seriously not ashamed of what this school has become? Smith glanced nervously at me, then shifted his eyes toward Henry Morgan, who was still holding his bruised jaw, and silently lowered his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Rockefeller. Truly. But the Morgan family, their influence is too powerful. I can't afford to cross them. I narrowed my gaze and replied in a low, razor-sharp tone. So what you're saying is, you're going to go against me? He flinched, visibly, then frantically waved his hands in protest. No, no. That's not what I meant, Mr. Rockefeller. I just meant. Enough, I snapped, cutting him off with a raised hand. Brian Smith, maybe it's time you considered retirement. Don't you think? Before he could respond, Henry Morgan stepped forward, clearly agitated. Seriously, Principal Smith? Have you completely lost your mind? You're really going to let this loser talk to you like that? He just assaulted me, and you're still trying to stay neutral? You sure you want to risk going up against the Morgan family over this piece of trash? The crowd around us nodded in agreement, murmuring support for Henry's outburst. And now Smith was caught in the middle, visibly sweating, unsure which side to stand on. To most of the parents in this room, he probably looked like a frail old man who'd lost his grip on reality. But I knew better. Brian Smith wasn't unsure because of his age, he was hesitating because he didn't know whose power outweighed the others, mine, or the Morgans. I sat back casually, arms folded, watching the scene unfold like an audience member waiting for the next act. I was actually curious to see which way Brian Smith would fall. But the decision he made left me disappointed. Instead of choosing a side, he chose cowardice. He kept the guards from laying a finger on me, but also refused to let me retaliate against Morgan. And just like that, the room plunged into a tense stalemate, one side standing off against the other, no one daring to make the first move. But Henry Morgan wasn't used to being challenged. In his mind, money built this school, money made him king, and everyone here should have been bowing at his feet. For someone like him, losing face was worse than losing a fortune. That's exactly the kind of spoiled, entitled man he was, thinking that if he waved a few bills, the whole world would kneel. Too bad for him, he picked the wrong man to play power games with. As even Principal Smith failed to rein things in, the crowd rallied behind Morgan again. Some even stood up and clapped like this was some kind of heroic scene. And the person in the most miserable position now? Without a doubt, Brian Smith. He is caught in a dilemma. On one side are the Morgan family, the richest family in the Upper East Side, on the other, me, the man his superiors had specifically instructed him to protect. And just as he was drowning in indecision, my wife stormed into the room. Anna barged in, clutching a leather briefcase, clearly fresh from a meeting. The moment she saw Henry Morgan's bruised face, her expression darkened with fury. "George! Are you insane? You laid hands on Mr. Morgan? Do you have a death wish?" She rushed over to Alice, then turned to me, jabbing a finger in my face. "What are you waiting for? Apologize to Mr. Morgan, now." I let out a quiet laugh and met her eyes without flinching. "Anna," I said slowly, voice like ice, "you've got it all wrong. If anyone here owes someone an apology, it's you." After hearing my words, a flicker of surprise flashed in Anna's eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly. "George," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "don't blame me for this. You've got no one to blame but yourself for being so damn naive. I married you while I was already pregnant, and you didn't even notice. You actually believed that child was yours." She glanced at Henry Morgan, then looked back at me, her tone softening slightly, as if she thought she was being generous. "Henry had been overseas for years. I'll admit, it was convenient having you around to raise the kid. For that, I'm grateful." She pulled a card from her coat pocket and handed it to me. "There's $1 million on this card. Consider it compensation for your time. Let's call it even." I didn't even look at the card. Instead, I fixed my gaze on her and asked, "So you've been lying to me from the very beginning, haven't you?" I'd never been the kind of man who questioned her every move, never once invaded her privacy. And now I was standing here, finding out even the child wasn't mine. My chest tightened with disbelief. "And you don't call that deception?" I asked through gritted teeth. "I'm giving you money," she said casually. "You should be thanking me. With that cash, you'll be set for the rest of your life." Before she could finish the smug smile on her face, I ripped the card in two and flung it right back at her. "Anna," I said, voice low and sharp, "you lied to me for 3 damn years. And you think you can fix that with a bank transfer?" She avoided my eyes now, unable to meet my stare. But before she could say a word, Henry Morgan stepped in behind her. "Oh please," he sneered, "enough with the guilt trip. You're just bitter because the money's not enough. Go ahead, name your price. I've got plenty." I looked at him like he was nothing more than a clown in a suit, laughing under my breath. "Mr. Morgan, don't get ahead of yourself. I'll deal with you right after I'm done with these two." The moment the words left my mouth, Anna's temper flared. "Don't try to act tough, George Rockefeller. You're nothing but a kept man who's been living off a woman. All these years, you never even had a real job. Don't act like you've ever brought anything to this marriage." She crossed her arms, proud of her little performance. "Truth is, if it weren't for Alice still being young, I'd have divorced you a long time ago." I scoffed quietly. "Me? No real job? Alice got into one of the most prestigious schools in the country thanks to a single call I made. Did she seriously believe Henry Morgan's check was what made that happen? Her voice had barely faded when the crowd burst into laughter again. Did you hear that? This guy's got nothing going for him, except maybe his face. Exactly. At least Mr. Morgan has power and money. This guy's just a leech. Let's be honest, Anna and Mr. Morgan make a way better couple. The parents clapped, showering Morgan with compliments like a well-rehearsed cheer squad. Not a single one of them stood up for me. Because to them, everything was transactional: status, favors, image. Morals didn't stand a chance in this room. And if that's what their kids were growing up around, I couldn't help but wonder how rotten the next generation would turn out. Anna, I said calmly, you want a divorce? Fine. I'll give you what you want. But I have one condition. She raised an eyebrow, already smirking. What now? Money? A house? Say the word, I'll sign the check. I smiled and shook my head. No. I just want you to remember this moment. Because after today, don't come crawling back when everything falls apart. Anna rolled her eyes, laughing dismissively. Still clinging to your little pride? You're pathetic. Fine. If anyone regrets this later, it'll be you. Her voice grew more condescending by the second. She thought I was grasping at straws. But what she didn't know was, I was already done. The only mistake you've made, I said, stepping closer, is thinking I ever wanted you back. I'm not warning you out of desperation. I'm telling you what's coming, because soon, everything you think you have will turn to dust. As for that precious Mr. Morgan behind you, he will get the punishment he deserves. I had planned to walk away gracefully, for old time's sake, for the years we spent together. But some people, just don't know when to stop pushing. Especially the mother and daughter standing in front of me. Spare me the drama, Anna snapped. You should be grateful we even gave you a chance to leave with dignity. You really think you can compare yourself to Mr. Morgan? Get real, George. He could crush you with a finger. She wasn't done ranting, but I'd heard enough. I raised a hand and cut her off mid-sentence. That's enough. No more talking. We'll do it your way, let's get this divorce over with. The moment my words landed, Anna pulled a thick stack of papers from her briefcase. I've already had the paperwork prepared. Sign it, now. As she laid the divorce agreement on the table, it only confirmed everything I'd suspected all along. From the moment Alice rejected me, to Henry Morgan's grand entrance, to this public divorce ambush, it had all been orchestrated. She even used daughter as a pawn. A woman like that didn't deserve an ounce of my sympathy. Without hesitation, I picked up the pen, signed my name across the bottom, and slid the papers back toward her. Anna seemed momentarily thrown by how quickly I complied. A flicker of annoyance passed through her eyes. What's so funny, George? She asked. I looked up, my voice cool and emotionless. Why wouldn't I be smiling? You think I'd be sad to be rid of you? You should hurry up and sign, too, before your precious Mr. Morgan changes his mind and drops you. Her face flushed red in embarrassment and fury. Fine. Like I'd ever regret this. She scribbled her signature onto the page with spiteful force, glaring at me as she did. And just like that, 3 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. Oddly enough, I didn't feel any sadness. Not even a twinge of regret. All I felt was relief. Like a heavy chain had finally been lifted from around my neck. As soon as the papers were signed, Anna tossed me a scornful look. We're done here. You can leave now. Anna, I said, tilting my head slightly, no need to be in such a rush. I let my gaze sweep slowly across their happy little trio. Now that we're officially done, it's time we settle a few outstanding debts. Before I could continue, Henry Morgan finally opened his mouth. Did I hear that right? Are you threatening my wife and child? George Rockefeller, do you even know who I am? Do you have any idea what kind of power the Morgan family holds? Anna's face lit up with pride at Henry's so-called chivalry. She looked at him like he was some kind of knight in shining armor. I couldn't help but laugh. Oh, the mighty Morgan family, I said with a smirk. You're just as clueless as she is. You don't even know who you've crossed. Anna jumped in with a sneer. Are you seriously comparing yourself to him? Henry Morgan was the richest man on the Upper East Side. You're nothing. Her voice rose with each word, practically spitting in my face. I stayed calm. Smiling faintly, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Yeah, let the Morgan family know, I said. Their dog just bit me. I ended the call and glanced up at the wall clock. Inside my head, I started counting down. I hadn't even reached 10 when Henry Morgan's phone began to ring. He stared at me, confused, then answered the call with shaky hands. Hey, Dad, what's up? The roar from the other end echoed through the entire room. You idiot. You had the nerve to lay hands on Rockefeller's woman? Henry's face went pale. Dad, please, lower your voice. I'm in a room full of people here. That only made the voice on the other end angrier. Don't you dare call me Dad. I don't have a son who's this stupid. I'm only going to say this once, if you still want to show your face on the Upper East Side, you'd better apologize to Mr. Rockefeller right now. If he doesn't forgive you, don't bother coming home. Henry was frozen. He'd never heard his father this furious. He was shaking. Then, humiliation hit him like a tidal wave. A dark patch spread across the front of his pants. He'd wet himself. As soon as the call ended, he staggered toward me like a child walking the plank, then bent 90 degrees in front of me. Mr. Rockefeller, he stammered, I am sorry. I'll give the woman and the kid back to you, just please, show mercy. I wrinkled my nose in disgust. The heir of the Morgan family actually doesn't even want his own wife and children? That doesn't quite match your family's reputation. Before I could say more, he dropped to his knees. No. I'm no heir. I'm nothing. Please, just let me go. He began slamming his forehead against the floor, over and over, until blood started seeping from a gash on his head. The entire room stood frozen in disbelief. From the moment the phone rang to the moment Henry hit his knees, less than 10 minutes had passed. Everyone stared at me in stunned silence. What the hell just happened? Wait, does this guy actually know the Morgan patriarch? I think that really was Mr. Morgan Sr. on the phone. Oh God, if that's true, then we're all screwed. I ignored the whispers and slowly turned to face Anna again. She stood there, pale, trembling, completely lost for words. I leaned in just slightly, voice calm, deliberate. So, Anna. Tell me now, do you regret it? Anna stared at me in stunned silence. George, who the hell are you? Before I could answer, Brian Smith, who had been quietly lingering at the side, suddenly rushed over, his face pale and remorseful. Mr. Rockefeller, he cried out. Please accept my deepest apologies for earlier. I was blind, I didn't know who I was dealing with. I should never have hesitated. I was foolish, truly foolish. His voice echoed through the room, silencing every whisper, every breath. The entire class fell into a stunned hush. Anna's face drained of color. She stood frozen in place, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. As the weight of my true identity sank in, all eyes turned to me, this time not with disdain or mockery, but with disbelief and awe. Then, as if the realization had broken something inside her, Anna dropped to her knees before me, tears streaming down her face. All around us, the same parents who had once sneered at me now looked at me with wide-eyed reverence. Even Alice, the daughter who had once shouted that I didn't deserve to be her father, had retreated to a corner, trembling. I looked down at her from where I stood, a cold sigh slipping from my lips. You should be grateful you're still a minor, I said flatly. Otherwise, your fate would have been no different from your mother's. Alice's eyes welled with tears. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Regret twisted across her face. Dad. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. I didn't mean it, I got caught up in things. Can I still be your daughter again? Please. I promise I'll listen to you, I'll never try to compare myself to anyone again. Her words turned into sobs, loud and broken. I'm sorry. I'll never do it again, I swear. I tilted my head, watching her cry without emotion. You know, I used to think you were just a little spoiled, I said quietly. But I didn't realize how dark your heart had already become. If I hadn't figured things out, you and your mother would have kept this lie going forever, wouldn't you? From now on, you'd better keep your head down. Because if you step out of line again, I won't hesitate to make you disappear from Manhattan. That last line wasn't just for her, it was meant for Anna too. The two of them exchanged a look, then bowed their heads at the same time, finally understanding just how little they meant to me now. With everything finally settled, Brian Smith tried one last time to salvage the moment. Mr. Rockefeller, please, stay for lunch. I'd like to personally apologize, offer a proper meal in your honor. But I didn't even glance his way. I simply turned on my heel and walked out. Anna tried to stop me. "George, wait." I cut her off without even looking back. I don't waste time on divorced women with baggage. As for what would happen to the mother and daughter I'd left behind, that was no longer my concern. Years passed. Then one day, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was just one sentence. "Mr. Rockefeller, your daughter says she misses you. Could you come back, just once?" I stared at the message for a moment, then calmly deleted it, and blocked the number. From that day forward, I walked alone. And I never looked back.